I'm often reminded how easy it is to forget the small things. Perhaps you've heard the phrase, how you do anything is how you do everything. And it's true. If you're lackadaisical about things that you should be diligent about, whether it's paying your bills on time or paying your bills at all, or how you clean your house or how you clean your car, or how you clean your desk at work, or how you clean your locker at school, or your backpack, or the floorboard of your car. Generally, the consistency from one to the other is going to be obvious. Now, there are some people whose car is immaculate and their house is a wreck, or their desk is immaculate and their house is a wreck, or their house is immaculate and their desk is a wreck. And generally, those people are, for lack of a better phrase, putting up a front. They're putting on a show. They have someone to impress in one arena or another. They want to make sure that the people who see their house or see their desk or see their car think the very best about them. But it's a facade. It's not really the nature of who they are. Then there are those who perhaps they get behind in one area, but it's because they're catching up in every other area, and they're just not quite doing it. An example might be someone who hasn't maintained their yard, but they're wrapping up their doctorate's degree. And I know those two sound so irrelevant to each other, but if you've ever tried to work on a degree program of any level, the amount of work and effort, mental energy, time consumption, research that goes into that can pretty much drive a person insane if they're not careful. Imagine trying to do that while running a household. Imagine trying to do that while running a household, holding down a full-time job and raising kids. And suddenly you get to the place where your life is oversaturated and something has to drop, or something has to be moved aside, or something has to be minimized or put on hold for a time frame in order to do what it is that you've set in front of you. Recently I had a conversation. It was a very enlightening conversation, and a lot of it had to hinge around the mentality difference between an employee with a job and an entrepreneur. And in all honesty, there's a significant difference in mindset, and yet a lot of the similarities are there as well. An example might be someone who's always had a job kind of expects that paycheck to be steady and to be permanent, if you will. But as we all know, there are layoffs. And so while you may have a steady job and you may have a steady income and you may be able to count on that amount of money on a regular basis, if it comes to a halt, what's your plan? See, that was my situation in 2008 after 10 years at Verizon, with not only a steady paycheck, but a constantly climbing paycheck and a very nice paycheck. Suddenly I became full-time employed by myself. And while our business was able to grow to actually higher gross incomes than the paycheck I had, it was kind of a you kill what you eat, you eat what you kill kind of a scenario. So there was no money coming in if there was no sales being made. And guess who the chief salesman was? Me. And guess who the product was, or what the product was that I was selling? It was me. In 2008, 2009, that was strictly as a DJ. So we would sell weddings and graduation parties and proms and homecoming dances and school dances for elementary schools at the end of the school year or the beginning of the school year. And so we stayed pretty busy doing all that kind of stuff. But it was, if you're not DJing, you better be selling the next DJ thing. If you're not already today making money because you have 5 events to do, then you better be finding a way to sell the next 5 events. And so that evolution over time in my life over the last 10 years has evolved from selling a DJ event, as an example, to selling a training course. And I have training courses for churches. I have training courses that are one-on-one individual classes for leadership. I have training courses that are designed for government groups or PTAs, etc. And so filling that pipeline is a full-time job. It's like working on a degree program. It's how much time are you going to put into that, and what are your strategic objectives? Is it to call 50 customers over the course of this week, or is it to call 50 customers over the course of this day? So due diligence, while it may be a legal term, to do all your homework, to understand all the ramifications that are possible, to understand what could happen and what should happen and where you need to go next. All of those applications are just as true for an entrepreneur, for a parent, for a person of faith. There are certain things that you should do every day. Some call them the spiritual disciplines. When it comes to parenting, that making sure that your children are doing the things that they need to do is part of your due diligence. You have to do the things of diligence. They don't happen by accident. The things that need to be done, whether it's mowing the lawn or cleaning out your car or washing your car, those things don't happen by accident. They happen because you have a plan for them. John Maxwell has a book called Today Matters. And in that book, which is a pretty fat book, he talks about everything from the way that you think today, the mindset that you have today, the way that you approach the day. Will I have a bad day or a good day? Will I have a bad day if I go to leave the house, my car won't start? Will I allow that to dictate the quality of my day for the rest of the day? If I dwell on that thought, will it ruin my day, or will I come up with a solution? Everybody thinks a little bit differently, but how will you think about the day? What will you do specifically in your mind to make sure that you are pushing yourself towards success of the goals and objectives you've established for the day? Do you have homework that needs to be done? Parents should be on top of their kids about their homework. Let me see your homework. Let me see what you're learning in class. Help me to understand where you're going next with your coursework. Show me what the assignment was, and let me help you to decide whether or not you've completed that assignment. Have you finished the homework that you had? Is this homework, are these elective classes perhaps, are they relevant to the degree program you want to pursue when you get out of school? And all of these ideas are the daily things that we have to do. We daily have to shower, right? We should. We daily have to eat a good meal, at least one, if possible. We daily have to feed our minds with something that causes us to grow and to think, to inspire and to enlarge us. We daily have to add value to others. But all of these are things that we have to decide to do. We have to put them in our strategic vision. We have to implement them day by day until they become a habit. Every day we have to do something of diligence. And it's hard when you're an entrepreneur and you have to be both the product and the salesperson. You have to both deliver the job and sell the job. That can be a little complicated to get lost in the weeds of. It's the difference between working in your business and working on your business, like we discussed last week. It's a pretty big deal. But the due diligence may also say, I want to sell 15 packages of whatever, whether it's a training package or maybe you sell health and fitness, maybe you sell supplements, maybe you sell crochet, I don't know, whatever it is. But if there are 15 of those packages, incremental deliveries that you need to sell over the next week or the next 2 weeks, then how many sales calls does it require that you build a relationship with enough people that when you get to the bottom of that filter, there are 15 closed transactions? Well, in sales management, we've always looked at that and said, generally speaking, and this isn't always true, but you can ask Brian Flanagan as an example, it's a pretty good rule of thumb that for every 10 phone calls you make, you're going to get one conversation. And from that one conversation, you get a 1 in 10 chance of actually having a sale. So if you make 100 phone calls and have 10 conversations, you might close one sale. Well, if that's one sale for every 100 phone calls, but you need 15 phone calls, or you need 15 sales by the end of the week or the end of the month to close the amount of volume of sales to keep your household or your business afloat, then you're going to have to back that number up, right? So if 100 phone calls equals 10 conversations equals one sale, then in order to have 15 sales, you have to have 1,500 phone calls. Now, maybe your sales cycle is a little shorter than that. Maybe your ability to close a lead is a little hotter than that. Maybe you only have to make 10 phone calls to close one sale. Well, then you have to have 150 phone calls to close 15 sales. You follow me? The due diligence aspect of that is asking yourself the question over the history of being able to sell this, what have I sold that sells the best? What business element do I offer that has the highest demand? What part of me or my products or my services would we consider the low-hanging fruit? If I were to go out and pound on doors or dial phones or send out postcards, which one do people beat a path to my doorway to get first? Well, obviously that's the one you want to be selling first as well, unless you found yourself in a place where the only reason that one sells is because the price is so low and you have no profit in it, so you'll spend all of your time fulfilling it and making no money. Yes, there are quite a few people who do business that way because they feel like the volume of sales will make up. Well, eventually it could, but then you're going to find yourself asking this question: am I working on my business or am I working in it? Because if you're working in it 24/7 to deliver the low-hanging fruit that's also low profit margin, you're going to find yourself working very, very hard and accomplishing very, very little. Your gap isn't going to grow if there's not a big difference between the selling price and the manufacturing price. That's just a reality. So it's one thing to sell one thing 1,000 times with $1 a piece profit and have $1,000. But think of all the delivery, the manufacturing cost or the delivery cost or the time that it takes you to deliver that product. So if you're selling it and making $1 a piece on it, that's awesome. But if it takes you any amount of time or effort or expense to generate that 1,000 sales, $1,000 for 1,000 sales is not a whole lot of margin. Especially if you have one or two products that could sell with a $200 or $300 margin, or a couple of products that could sell with a $500 margin, or one awesome product that sells with a $1,000 margin. It may take you longer to sell that, but look at it like this. If you have one product that sells with $1 margin and you sell it 1,000 times, how many phone calls, how many relationships, how many network meetings, how many deal offers do you have to make before you get 1,000 closes? We're talking the 1 to 100 ratio, you're talking in the millions, right? That's a lot of phone calls, a lot of relationships, a lot of networking to sell $1. But if we're in the $200 or $300 range, and suddenly we cut that down, even if you have to make the same number of phone calls, the amount of time to close the deal may be a little longer, but you only got to close 5 of them for $1,000 rather than 1,000 of them for $1. And if you do happen to have that sweet spot deal where your profit margin is $500 and you can close 2 or 3 of those, you've suddenly done 97% less work and generated the same amount of revenue. And there may be that 1 or 2 deals that you have that the profit margin is $1,000. That's the one you really ought to be focused on. In my opinion and in my experience, when you're selling the $1,000 deal on a strong and regular basis, when you're focused here, there will always be customers who want to back off the price. When you're focused here, there will always be customers who want to trial run. They want to do something small first. Well, if you're selling the $1,000, the $1,001 deals, the odds that this $1,000 deal is going to pop up are very, very slim. But if you're selling the $1,000 deal, the odd that the $1 deal is going to happen is very, very high. Why? Because customers want the trial version, because customers want a lower price point, because customers want an opportunity to test you out and see if your product, your service, your training, your quality of person is something they want to deal with. Now remember, again, how you do anything, the $1 level is how you do everything at the $1,000 level and vice versa. If your product delivery, your quality of service, your customer care, the results that they get at a $1,000 price are expected to be off the charts, they are expected to be off the charts at the $1 deal too. Why? Because what I said is true. If you're selling this deal, you may win them. They may even look at you and go, that looks like a great value. That's a great price on a great product. And if it does half of what he says it's going to do, man, I want in on that. But before we spend that much money, let's try down here. And here's what happens to a lot of entrepreneurs. They will focus on one bracket or the other at the exclusion of the other brackets. So they might focus on this $500 sweet spot, because it's easier to close than the $1,000 deal. But because they're so focused on that, they're really not even prepared to close the deal with the $1,000 deal. And they've only kind of halfway completed the readiness of the $200 deal or the $1 deal. So the $1 deal may be an accident that, I didn't even know you could sell those, but I'm going to go ahead and sell them. And the $200 deal is kind of a, well, if I land it, then I'll take the money on it, but it's not really quite ready yet. Because the $500 deal is what I've been focused on. So when the $1,000 opportunity comes along, I won't be ready for that either, because I really haven't invested the time in the sale. And in fact, you may find yourself like I did, with your mouth hanging open when the opportunity comes for that. There have been a couple of instances in my life, and I'll wrap up with this. There was a time that I spoke for a Chamber of Commerce meeting, and I knew it was a small audience. I knew it was a new market for me. And most of the people in that Chamber of Commerce meeting I'd never met before. I believe I ran into one of them, and they invited me, and I had a chance to go. It was in a new part of town for me. It was a new group of people for me. It was a completely new audience for me. But after a couple of visits, I had a chance to present my offering. And so I was brought in to do a demonstration for them, and I did the demonstration on how I can teach people to communicate their story better. As I finished up my presentation, and it had a great response, a great emotional response, a great audience response, great interaction from everybody in the audience. And as I wrapped up, a gentleman came to me and he said, what do you charge for coaching? And the time that he asked that question, I only had one coach, and I only had her because she refused to take no for an answer, and literally. Now, I still do some work with her almost 7 years later, and she still kind of has the same attitude that she's not going to take no for an answer. And she knows who she is. She was my very first coaching client, so she knows exactly who she is. So when this gentleman said, what do you charge for coaching? I had literally just that week put together some plans and some actions on what it would look like if I was coaching people one-on-one, what it would cost to do that, and how much time I would have to invest to pull it off. So I had a few pricing ideas in my head, and I had a few implementation ideas in my head, and I had some stuff to go along with that, both supporting material and content that I had created and content that I have licensed to from other places. And so when he asked the question, I was just almost ready to say, this is exactly how this works. I said, well, let's sit down and talk about it. I want to get a better idea of what you're looking for. And then he asked for something that to this date isn't completely prepared to answer the question. He said, I want one of everything in your library, all of the content that you've ever produced. How do I get my hands on it? I thought that was a bit of an unusual ask. Obviously, the budget wasn't an issue for him. He never even asked the price of it. He just wanted one of everything that I've ever produced. Whether it was around storytelling, or it was around leadership, or it was around attitude, he wanted one of everything. And I didn't have it. I had never pondered the idea that packaging all of it together in one offering was going to be a good thing. I told you only one more story, but I want to throw this one in too, because this speaks to that difference between the $1,000 package and the $10 package, or the $1 profit margin, the $1,000 profit margin, and all the levels in between. There was a time that I had a chance to speak at a seminar. It was the very first seminar that I'd spoken at where you don't get paid to speak, but you get a percentage of everything that sells in the back of the room that's your product. So basically you're paying to speak to this crowd, but you get to keep a portion of everything that you sell. So it's completely your onus to be able to close the deal from the front of the room. But it's also up to you what you offer. So I went in and I made my presentation, I made my offer, and I sold, you ready for this? To 100% of the crowd. Everyone in the room bought from me. 100%. In fact, completely sold out of the product that I had. Another guy came up. We've since become friends. I ended up taking him to the hotel at the end of the day, and we had quite a conversation. And he came up and made his presentation, and he sold to less than 20% of the audience. But he made about 10 times what I did. Why? Because he had a product with a $500 price range on it. And while that product wasn't for everybody in the room, the 25% who bought it put him over the top in product sales compared to what I made because I only had a $10 product to sell. I sold it to everybody in the room. I sold 100% of it, sold out of my product. That's a great thing, but not having the depth of product is the difference between having a $1 profit margin and a $1,000 profit margin. And when I say you've got to do your diligence, yes, being able to sell from the front of the room is part of that. Yes, being able to know what package to offer is a huge part of that. Knowing that you've got inventory to offer when that guy says, sell me the entire library, or you've got a coaching package ready when he says, I want to sign up as a coaching client. All of those things are absolutely necessary, but understand this. When I talk about due diligence, what I'm talking about is, have you taken the time to prepare a $1 profit product, a $50 profit product or service, a $200, a $500, a $1,000? Because if you don't have all those things along that scale, you're going to be missing out on opportunity because you can't serve the need right in front of you. Due diligence as an entrepreneur, as a parent, as a person of faith means looking at all of those little details and daily doing what needs to be done to move them forward. The biggest challenge of being an entrepreneur is that you are both the product and the salesman. But in addition to those things, you are probably the idea, you are the creator, you are the creation of the product, the organization of the product, the organization of the sale, and it's all your responsibility. And if you haven't mapped that out yet, get a coach. Get an entrepreneur coach, get a sales coach, get somebody who can walk through the daily process with you, someone who can help you line out, all right, from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. you need to be, or 12 p.m. you need to be making phone calls because that's the best time of the day to call people. If you're calling them after lunch, if you don't already have a meeting scheduled, they're not going to be ready to talk. The earlier in the day you can catch them and actually get them on the phone, the better chance you have of closing that sale. Depending on the type of customer you have, you may have the kind of customer that you have to call them in the evening at home after work, or you're not going to get a conversation with them. You follow me? Due diligence looks different in every application, but how you do anything is how you do everything. I'm J Loren Norris, and you've been watching Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.